My name is Marcus Brennan, and I died at 42 years old. I know that might sound strange, a dead man telling his story, but let me explain. Because what happened to me on that rainy November night changed everything I thought I knew about life, death, and what comes after. I was a billionaire, owner of one of the world's largest tech companies, accustomed to controlling everything, business, people, results. I was the kind of man who walked into a room and everyone fell silent. Power, money, influence, I had it all. And I believed in nothing but myself. God? Religion? Nonsense for weak people who needed emotional crutches. I was my own God. My empire was my temple. My bank account was my salvation. Until that night. Rain was falling hard as I drove my Bentley down the highway. I was on the phone, as always, closing another multi-million-dollar deal. I didn't see the curve. I didn't see the truck. I only heard the horrible sound of twisting metal and felt an impact that shut off my world like a switch. And then, nothing. Just for a second, maybe less. When I opened my eyes again, there were no ambulances, no doctors, no destroyed interior of my car. There was only heat, an unbearable heat that seemed to burn from the inside out, consuming every cell of my being. I was standing on a dark, rocky surface. Around me stretched a landscape I can only describe as a nightmare made real. Mountains of ash, rivers of something that looked like molten lava, and a darkness that wasn't just the absence of light, but a tangible presence of despair. The air was dense, suffocating. I could hear screams in the distance. The smell of sulfur burned my nostrils. Where am I?" I whispered to no one. A creature emerged from the shadows. I can't adequately describe its appearance without you thinking I'm crazy, but imagine the worst nightmare you've ever had and multiply it by 1,000. Its face was a grotesque caricature of humanity, twisted into a malicious smile. "Welcome to your eternal destiny, Marcus Brennan," it said in a voice that sounded like breaking glass. "Welcome to hell." I laughed. I swear I laughed. It was a nervous, hysterical laugh. Hell? You're kidding me. This doesn't exist. I don't believe in hell. It's just a dream, a hallucination, my brain releasing endorphins while I die. "Do you believe now?" the creature asked. With a casual gesture, the ground beneath my feet opened up. I fell screaming through layer after layer of torment. I saw faces I knew, people from my life trapped in their own particular nightmares. I saw Johnson, the executive I deceived and ruined. I saw Sarah, my assistant, whom I fired because she was too religious and dared to talk to me about Jesus. I saw homeless people I ignored on the streets of Manhattan, now looking at me with accusing eyes. When I stopped falling, I was in a dark, claustrophobic chamber. My body had no visible wounds, but the pain, God, the pain was worse than anything physical I had ever experienced. It was a pain in the soul, a consuming void that devoured me from the inside out. It was the weight of every selfish choice, every cruel word, every moment I chose money over humanity. "I built an empire," I shouted into the void, my voice echoing uselessly. "I employed thousands of people. I donated millions to charity." A soft voice answered, echoing from the walls. "You donated crumbs in search of recognition. You employed to profit. You built to feed your own ego. And you trampled everyone who dared to stand in your way." "Who's speaking?" I demanded, my old arrogance still trying to hold on, even in that terrible place. "You know who I am," the voice replied calmly. A light began to shine in the center of the chamber. It wasn't like the scorching heat of the hell that surrounded me, but something different, a pure light, almost painful in its clarity. And in that light, a figure began to materialize, It was a man of simple appearance, wearing white clothes. His hands showed deep marks, scars on the wrists. His feet were also marked. When I looked into his eyes, I saw something that completely broke me. Unconditional love mixed with a deep, ancient sadness. "Jesus," I whispered, falling to my knees. It wasn't faith that made me recognize him. It was absolute, undeniable knowledge. The same way you know fire burns or that you need air to breathe, I simply knew who he was. "Marcus," he said, and his voice carried centuries of compassion. "You spent your entire life denying my existence. You built your own reality where you were God, and now you're reaping what you sowed." I didn't know," I started to say, but the words died on my lips, because it was a lie. I knew. I always knew, at some deep level I chose to ignore. I remembered the countless times I ridiculed people of faith at business dinners, the times I used science as an excuse for selfishness, the opportunities I had to change, to be better, and I ignored them all. "You knew," Jesus confirmed gently. "I put countless people in your path. Michael, your driver, who tried to share his faith with you and you fired him. Sarah, whom you publicly humiliated. And Nathan." My heart, or whatever I still had in that place, broke when I heard that name. "Nathan," I repeated in a broken whisper. "My son. My only son." I hadn't spoken to Nathan for 15 years. Since the day he announced he was donating his inheritance and going to Africa as a missionary instead of taking over my company. I called him an idiot, a failure, a waste, and I slammed the door in his face. "He prayed for you every night," Jesus said softly. "Even after you rejected him, even while you were dying on that road, he was kneeling on the other side of the world, begging for your soul." The chamber walls began to tremble, and then began what I can only call judgment. Images appeared around me like a 360-degree film. My entire life unfolded before my eyes. Every lie, every betrayal, every moment of casual cruelty. I saw Jennifer, my secretary, whom I repeatedly harassed. I saw how she developed severe depression after I fired her for low performance when she finally refused my advances. She attempted suicide 3 times. I saw Robert Chen, my business partner, whose revolutionary idea I stole. I used legal loopholes to take everything from him. He lost everything, his company, his home, his family, and then he killed himself, jumping from the George Washington Bridge on a cold winter morning. I saw my ex-wife, Jennifer, crying alone in our apartment after I left her for a model 20 years younger. I saw how she sank into alcohol and antidepressants, trying to cope with 15 years of emotional abuse I called marriage. I saw every homeless person I ignored, every employee I cruelly fired, every life I destroyed in my climb to the top. "Stop!" I screamed, covering my face with my hands. "Please, stop! I can't take seeing more." "This is the truth of your life," Jesus said, his voice firm but not cruel. "The truth you avoided facing. Here, there are no more illusions, no more excuses, only the reality of what you chose to be." I was completely broken. I sobbed like a child, something I hadn't done since I was 7 years old, when my father told me real men don't cry. "I'm sorry," I cried. "God, I'm so sorry. If I could go back, if I could change everything." Jesus knelt before me. He took my face in his hands, those hands marked by nails he bore for people like me, and made me look into his eyes. "What if you could?" he asked. I lifted my swollen eyes to him, confused. "What?" "What if I gave you another chance, an opportunity to go back and live differently?" For a moment, I thought I had heard wrong. Is that possible?" "With God, all things are possible," Jesus answered. "But understand this, Marcus. If you go back, It won't be easy. You'll have to face the consequences of your actions. You'll have to humble yourself. You'll have to choose love over profit, people over power, faith over control. And you'll have to do this knowing what you saw here today, carrying the weight of what almost became your eternal destiny. "I'll do anything," I promised, and this time I was sincere in a way I had never been in my entire life. "Anything! Just let me go back! Let me fix what I broke!" Jesus remained silent for a long moment, his eyes penetrating every corner of my soul. Then he nodded slowly. "Then go. But remember, this grace isn't cheap. It was bought with blood and sacrifice. Don't waste it, Marcus, because there won't be a third chance." "I won't," I swore, tears streaming down my face. "I promise I won't." Jesus touched my forehead gently, and the world exploded in white light. I woke up in a hospital bed, tubes connected to my body, machines beeping around me. Pain ran through every inch of my physical being, but it was a welcome pain. It meant I was alive. A nurse rushed in when the monitors started going off. "Dr. Chen, he's awake! Mr. Brennan is awake!" Doctors and nurses flooded the room, checking my vital signs with expressions of absolute shock. "This is impossible," one of them muttered. "You were dead, Mr. Brennan, clinically dead for 7 minutes. There shouldn't be any brain activity, let alone—" "How long?" I asked in a hoarse voice, my throat burning. 3 days since the accident," the nurse replied gently, adjusting my pillow. "You suffered massive trauma. No one expected you to survive. It's a miracle." A miracle. Yes, that's exactly what it was. "I need to see my son," I said, grabbing the nurse's hand with an urgency that frightened her. "Nathan, he's in Africa, but please find him. Tell him his father needs him. Tell him that I love him." They were the hardest words that ever left my mouth. In the following weeks, while my body slowly healed, I began the much more difficult task of healing my soul. The doctors were amazed at my physical recovery, but what they didn't know was that I had motivation beyond medical understanding. I had seen hell. I had looked Jesus in the eyes, and I wasn't going to waste this chance. When Nathan finally arrived, 2 weeks later, I barely recognized him. He was thinner, tanned by the African sun, with a peace in his eyes I had never seen before. He entered my room hesitant, uncertain. "Hi, Dad," he said simply. I started crying. I couldn't help it. I extended my arms to him, something I hadn't done since he was a child. "Nathan," I said, my voice breaking, "I'm sorry. For everything. You were right, about everything, and I was too blind, too proud to see." I saw his defenses begin to fall. Tears filled his eyes too. "Dad, what happened to you?" "I died," I said simply, "and God gave me a second chance. Because of you, because of your prayers." Nathan approached the bed and held my hand, and father and son cried together for the first time in decades. But that was just the beginning of a long journey. I knew I had a mountain to climb, and every step would be painful. I sought out Jennifer, my ex-wife. It took me months to find her. She had changed her name and moved to Oregon. When I finally saw her in a small cafe in Portland, she almost ran away. "Jennifer, please," I begged, "just give me 5 minutes." She stayed, but kept her distance. I spent those 5 minutes asking for forgiveness, not with empty words, but with real tears and deep regret. I confessed every abuse, every cruelty, every time I made her feel small and worthless. "I don't expect you to forgive me," I said. "I don't deserve forgiveness, but you deserve to hear that nothing that happened was your fault. You deserve to know that I was wrong, completely wrong." Jennifer cried, and eventually, weeks later, she accepted my apology.
We didn't become friends, but the wound began to heal. I tracked down the other Jennifer, my former secretary. I offered not only substantial financial compensation, but a public apology. I used my media influence to tell my story, publicly admitting my mistakes. It was humiliating. It was necessary. I established a fund for Robert Chen's family. I sought out his widow and children. I couldn't bring Robert back, but I could at least try to alleviate the financial suffering I caused.
My transformation caused shockwaves in the business world. Tech mogul undergoes radical change after near-death experience, the headlines read. I was interviewed on TV shows. Some thought it was an elaborate publicity stunt. Others suggested I had brain damage from the accident. I didn't care. I let them talk. I had a mission. I began using my wealth in a radically different way, not to build more, but to restore. I founded homeless shelters in 5 major cities. I established a scholarship program for children from underserved communities. Full scholarships, no strings attached. I started going to church, not the fancy churches I used to attend for networking, but a small congregation in the Bronx where nobody knew who I was. My company? I completely restructured it. I implemented fair wages, on-site daycare, mental health programs. My shareholders were furious. My profits fell. I didn't care. I began traveling with Nathan to Africa to see the work he was doing. I saw hungry children being fed, sick people being healed, communities being transformed. And I understood, finally, what Nathan had found. Real purpose, not just success. 1 year after my accident, I was back on that road where I died. There was a simple cross at the site, placed there by Nathan. I knelt before it in the rain. "Thank you," I whispered, "for not giving up on me, for giving me this chance." The wind blew, and I swear I heard a soft voice. "Go and sin no more." I'm not perfect. I still make mistakes. I still struggle with my old self, the arrogant Marcus who thinks he knows everything. But now, when I feel that arrogance rising, I close my eyes and remember. I remember the heat of hell. I remember the screams. I remember the crushing weight of my sins. And I remember Jesus' marked hands holding me when I didn't deserve to be touched. This is my story. The story of a man who died an atheist and returned a believer, who went to hell and was allowed to return, who wasted 42 years of life and now tries to redeem the time he has left. I tell this story not to be admired. I tell it because if it can happen to me, to Marcus Brennan, the cynic, the atheist, the selfish, then it can happen to anyone. God's grace is real. Hell is real. Jesus is real. And it's not too late to change. Not until it is. I had my second chance. Don't waste yours.